you doing?
You have a birthday. Or are you having a birthday?
We're there, huh?
Hey, what? Reminds me.
Welcome, everyone, to North Ogden City Council. Meeting now will come to order. We'll begin by having the invocation and pledge allegiance by Ryan Barker, our council member.
Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity that we have to gather this evening, and we're grateful for the opportunity to discuss the affairs of our city and how we can better serve the residents of North Ogden. Please bless that you'll lead and guide us, and that we'll be able to do what's best for the community and for everyone involved in these things we say in the Son Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Everyone stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please turn off your cell phones or mute them so there won't be a disturbance to the meeting. And we'll begin now that the meeting is open to public comments.
Hello, my name is Riley Johnson. My address is 2955 North, 900 East. I wanted to talk about straws and how it just disposing of straws is improper, and how it impacts our environment. So 500 million straws are used and discarded every day in the U.S. alone. That's 175 billion a year filtering in landfills and littering our waterways and oceans. Straws are harmful to wildlife. When animals such as seabirds eat straws, they fill their stomachs and cause them to starve. Fish ingest 12,000 to 14,000 tons of plastic each in the North and Pacific alone. Studies have shown that a quarter of fish that turn up at fish markets have plastic in their stomach. This plastic leaches harmful toxins in the fish's bodies and ultimately in us when we eat them. Disposable straws are usually made from plastic that never breaks down. As time goes by, plastic will separate into smaller pieces but never completely biodegrades. We use straws for around 20 minutes before we toss them away, which is a very quick lifespan for an item that can't be recycled and will be on the planet forever. If we don't do anything about this issue, more and more animals will die from consuming straws and other plastics. To help this issue, we should decline straws at restaurants and dispose of plastic properly. We should encourage others to do the same. Our end goal is to eliminate single-use plastics and straws. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I live at 325 North, 800 East, and I want to talk about pollution, and it's a pretty big deal. And why should we care about pollution? Pollution is a growing concern for our environment, and it's not just affecting humans, it's affecting everybody. If nothing is done about pollution, the level of pollution, whether indoor or outdoor, has increased by dangerously high levels. As pollution is increased, it will make it impossible to breathe fresh air. Ways to stop pollution. You can use public transportation, use electric cars, biking, water, throw away garbage, and I know pollution it'll never go away, but we can do little steps to help it. And I was wondering, and I know that our environment it can get better if we take little steps to help pollution. That's it.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Hadley Johnson, and I live at 2955 North, 900 East, and I want to focus on climate change and how we can improve on it. So we should care about climate change because we can feel the effects too. Climate change threatens our agriculture, health, water supply, and more. So what will happen if nothing is done about it? Well, if all mankind fails to control global warming and we all also deal with fallout ranging from massive refugee crisis and submerged cities to scorching heat waves and droughts. What are some things we could help climate change? Well, for starters, we first get involved. Second, energy efficient, like turn off light switches when we are not using them, and lots more. The third thing we could do is choose renewable energy. Ask your utility to switch your account to clean renewable power. Fourth is eat very wisely. Grow your own food. Avoid processed foods. 5, trim your own waste, like recycling, and keep stuff out of landfills by keeping plastic, paper, metal, and glass out. 6, get informed. Keep updated by watching the latest news and reading the latest newspapers. I hope you will consider making a change for the benefit of North Ogden's community, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, young people, for coming and participating in City Council. Your points are well taken, and we have organized a clean air committee here in the community, and so we're trying to pursue some of the things you're talking about. But thanks for coming and making us aware of that.
Stephanie, if you'll call me, your dad's got my number. We'll get you in touch with the chair of the Clean Air Committee. We'd love to have some youth on there. That'd be great. All of you could come and help us with that. That'd be wonderful.
Thank you. If there's no other public comments, we'll move on to our agenda item. The second item is discussion of nuisance ordinances. Presenter will be John Call, our city administrative attorney.
Flush.
So, council, we've updated some portions of our nuisance ordinances recently. Probably the biggest one we've done most recently is our abandoned or dangerous buildings. We did that about 1.5 years ago, maybe. But there's several other provisions we need to possibly look at, as well as the police have identified some things that we could possibly add that would hopefully make their job a little easier as well. So I've asked the chief to be here. But the purpose of this discussion today was just to find what ordinances that council feels are most important, and then we can work on getting the language in for those ordinances. As you can see from this memo, there's about 8 different sections in our health and safety code section, and we wouldn't have to address them all at the same time. We could do them one at a time, but there are some that will probably need some significant changes in them, and we just wanted to kind of find out what council thought was most important and then start working on ordinances from there. I think it'd be good to have the chief come up and tell you some of the success stories he's had in past communities with tailoring ordinances to make their life a little easier.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and especially on this topic. Without any really hard quantitative backing, just anecdotally, I can tell you that a majority of our resources and our time are spent on a minority of the residents in the city. And statistically, there is a higher call for service and police responses to rental properties. And what is challenging sometimes is to have to keep going back to the same addresses for the same type of problems, and specifically that the worst of those is obviously drug activity, and secondly would be just disturbance and public nuisance type calls that we'd be involved in, which is loud parties and alcohol involved. What we've had in the past, we've found that many times there isn't a mechanism for us to contact the property owners. They don't know when we've been to their rental properties and when they haven't. And we've had luck in the past with having a nuisance ordinance address repeat draws on our resources. In other words, a house that's heavily drug involved, we get called back there time after time after time, and it can be different types of calls. It can be medical situations where somebody's overdosed and or they're under the influence of drugs and incapacitated and driving from that residence. It also includes obviously distribution and possession. And many times that type of activities also involves, in distribution, that there's people that owe people money and there it creates problems there, and we get involved on different levels. But we have found with a strong nuisance ordinance where where we are intolerant of multiple calls in for police services, it really strengthens our ability. And what we've done in the past is we had an ordinance that said that on the second time being called to a rental property for the same type of crime, that the property owner can be held criminally liable for that, is hosting or being complicit with a nuisance address. So what that means is the first time we go, let's say we serve a search warrant, which we do occasionally here in the city for drug activities. We contact the owner and put them on notice that we've now been there, and we put them on notice that their tenants are drug involved. And then after the second time, if the property owner hasn't taken any action to rectify the situation, and we're called back there a second time, he can actually be held not only civilly liable, but also criminally liable also. And it's phenomenal what that does to a community. It takes the wind right out of the sails of most of the illegal activity very quickly, because a lot of the landlords, a lot of the properties, they're not even aware of what's going on in the property, because obviously the tenants aren't telling them they're involved in criminal activities. But once we're involved and we're putting them on notice, then they're less tolerant of what's been going on beforehand, and we've had very good luck with that. That also applies to houses where we continually have teenage parties with alcohol involved. It also impacts some other aspects of that, but it gives great relief to the neighbors who don't want to be tolerant of that behavior, and also give us some recourse where we haven't had that in the past. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I have one question for you, Chief. In some of the other jurisdictions you've worked in, and have they had the good landlord program or not? And did you feel like, if it did you feel that was very successful? Well,
probably with you using that term, I assume you're talking about what Ogden City's done. And
I can't remember. We talked about it as a city at one time.
Yeah, that's commonly the Ogden model, they call it. We didn't have a model that was quite that large in scope. What we had is our problem was that so many rental properties are owned by out-of-state people or LLCs or family trusts, and there's really not a person. We actually had and this is a whole separate issue, but just to explain how it worked, we had a permitting system where they had to get a permit from the city to be a landlord and have a rental property. That way we knew every property and who to contact. In other words, and this has happened multiple times, where you have a SWAT team serve a no-knock search, kick the door in and arrest everybody there. Well, who do you turn the property over to? There's no responsible party. And that's not a very good situation, because we're the last ones there and we're responsible for it if we can't find a responsible party. And then we have no phone number to call a landlord who's out of state or, isn't in the area and maybe doesn't even care, So we made them get permits. So then we had a person with a phone number that we could call them and say, hey, by the way, we just arrested everybody out of this apartment and you need to come and secure it. And this just happened to us on New Year's Eve morning here in North Ogden. There was a aggravated assault with a weapon involved, and we had to get the SWAT team to come and kick the door in, and we had nobody to turn the apartment over to. And we finally, after about 4 hours, found somebody to respond. But that's how we did it. But the nuisance part of it was, we put the property owners on notice that behavior just wasn't going to be tolerated. And after 2 separate instances, then they became personally involved by being criminally charged with the nuisance.
So you think tweaking the nuisance would satisfy a lot of that and not have to worry about like a good, like what Ogden City does with a good landlord thing or something?
Well, you know, that, and I'm not being disparaging about that program. That's a good program. We just had a little different take on it, where it was more important to us to know who the property owner was and then communicate with them. So, and initially there was a little resistance to it, but after they found out, our goal wasn't to ding the property owner, because usually when you notify them and say, hey, we've just been to your place and this is what's going on, they want that information because they want to protect their property. And a lot of times, you know, we very rarely had to get to the second stage where we actually had to assign a property owner. Once they know that that's a possibility, it usually cleans the problem right up. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So are there other sections, for example, you'll notice on this list, our fireworks are governed under this ordinance, and we're planning on modifying that. You know, every year we've been passing the temporary ban, and we're going to make that a permanent thing. And I think we probably have a council member that is going to be assigned to assist in that, but.
Well, I'll work on it. I'll take the ball on that one.
We were looking at Carl.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Wow.
So on the noise ordinance, and like I said, John, I looked at them and stuff. Are we still gonna, when we tweak that one, are we gonna have it to where we had the one gentleman family come in that farms and they wanted to have a variance to it? We're gonna be able to allow variances on some of that, like they wanted to cut their hay at 4 in the morning instead of wait until it got too warm, you know, and stuff. Are we going to allow variance on some of that stuff, or can we make sure we get something like that in there to allow that?
So they're actually, I thought there is under the noise, there's currently a special permit for relief.
Okay.
That adds, people don't, if you were to ask the chief about that, special permits, it's kind of hard to say this is the rule, but we're going to let people violate the rule. Under state code, if it's a noise violation, then the state rule controls anyways. But I think you're right that there are some things we can identify as a special permit that doesn't necessarily violate the noise level, but maybe the hours of machinery operating or things like that. And that's something that, like you know, there are to harvest hay. You pretty much, well, the mayor could probably speak to this. You need to do it when the dew sets on it, which means nighttime. So, and most of the fields in the city are hay or alfalfa. I don't think we have any other crops in the city that I've seen. So,
There's grain.
There's a couple grain fields. Okay.
Typically, they're harvested during the day, so you got to have it dry.
Yeah. So. But the sound is one that we need to look at. We've never had any decibel levels or anything like that that we've dealt with. One of the other issues that we've had a lot lately is the construction site noises, as well as the refuse and inoperable vehicles. You know, we've brought this up a couple times about what's art, what's not. So in researching it, I think there's some language we can add that says if it's a piece of art, then it doesn't need a transmission, an engine, or some other things that, you know, hold fluids and could leak onto the soil. And so there's some things we can do to make people to commit to something being a piece of art as opposed to just leaving a junker in their front yard, that kind of stuff. So I feel like every one of these 8 section, well, probably 7. I feel like the vacant and dangerous building one is probably okay because we just went through it. But I think we need to add this one that the chief is talking about nuisance properties. That might be added as a subset of the buildings, or it might be its own section. But then also just kind of work through these others and just tweak them to make sure we're capturing the right stuff to really get rid of the type of things that we're trying to get rid of, and not impose unnecessary restrictions. So Other than those ones I mentioned, are there other areas of concern that we're not talking about or that we're missing?
Well, I think there's some that'll come up. That's quite a list
Yeah.
to start with. Are you looking for a prioritization of that list, or are we going to just start with the top there and work our way down?
I think what we'll probably do is start with the one that the chief's talking about, these nuisance rentals or the nuisance buildings, as well as the sound and the fireworks are probably the three top most important ones. Fireworks should be fairly simple because we just have to amend our last year's resolution into an ordinance, and then it'll just be stuck into the section. So
maybe John, he sent me a link to all the nuisance ordinance, and maybe you could send it to all these.
Yeah.
Send it out again, and then we can peruse them, and just if we have some things that we want to highlight that we think that we ought to address, we can send it back.
Okay.
You know, that may be good for everybody.
Okay.
It's really it seems like a lot, but it's really not that lengthy when you start getting into them. I mean, they're riveting reading. It's very entertaining.
Well, and the other thing you'll find is you'll find stuff in here that doesn't have anything to do with our city anymore. For example, under watercourse disruption, did you know that you're not allowed to dip your sheep in the streams anymore?
That's bad.
Well, oh no. And so many people don't realize to dip, you'd dig a big hole and then you'd walk the sheep through, and there'd be a treatment in the water to help clear the parasites and stuff off of them. But nobody in most counties do that, at least in the counties around here. And so I think there's some things we can take off the books that are carryovers from probably the first version of the city code. So, but it might, so we're not just going to be adding, we'll be taking out the stuff that's irrelevant, unless anyone's aware of someone who has sheep and want to run them through our streams.
John, what's protective ground cover?
So protective ground cover is essentially landscaping. The idea being that people need to maintain their yard so it doesn't just turn into weeds.
Oh.
And so we have a few, most people are pretty good about it. There's a few properties that have problems and have consistently been problematic. But in general, most people around the city are pretty good. But it deals with things like within the first 12 months of moving into a house, you have to have the front yard landscaped. And then within the first 18 months, you have to have the backyard. And that can be rock or, it could be xeriscape or, regular typical landscaping. It's just something actively has to be done to manage what goes on. And then you're not supposed to have any noxious weeds. For example, I've got some Dyer's woad growing on my property that I'm going to take care of this week, because if you don't catch it, then it just turns into a real mess. So hopefully my neighbors will also take care of theirs. So anyways.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll email a link out to this ordinance, and then, we'll start with those three if that works: the fireworks, the nuisance rentals, and the sound. Okay?
Sounds good.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, John. Next item, discussion or action to consider an agreement with J.D. Mercer for the sale of 6.6 acres of North Ogden City property located at approximately 190 East, 2550 North. Presenter will be John Call, our city administrator and attorney.
So, council, I got an updated. You all saw the agreement. The new one for the in your packet was slightly different from the one you saw last week. And let me show you the difference here. The stuff in blue was the original version that you saw last week, but down lower, it's this section. This section C is what we talked about as a council, essentially saying that it's the RDA, which is the redevelopment agency, is the one that's going to be in charge of filling in the pond. not the city or not the stormwater fund. And so what we did is we took this whole section out and then incorporated it into the agreement that the RDA board, the redevelopment agency, is going to look at later, where they're the ones that are committing to fill in the pond as part of the expenditure of the community development funds that are available for that type of project. The developer did send me a couple slight revisions today, and so I'll just pull those up so that you can see the two revisions that they've added under the agreement. The first one is they wanted to make sure it was clear. Oh, sorry, I grabbed the wrong one. So they wanted to make it clear that on the easement that we're keeping to run that storm pipe through, that they get to be involved with where that easement runs. It's going to be quite a wide easement, 25 feet, something like that, because it needs to be wide enough to dig next to the equipment, and it's a 54-inch pipe, so it's a big pipe. So they wanted to make sure it's clear that they have some say in where that easement is ultimately established. And then also that the closing date is at the earliest, which would be October 1st of next year, so 2019. And they wanted to make it clear that we would commit to close by November 1st of that same year. So we've got a month window, about 18 months away, to close on the property. And they just want to make it clear that as they start trying to find tenants for this property, that they can commit to them on a time when they'll start construction for them. So those were the two changes they've added to the agreement from when you've seen it. And then the one change that I just showed you that we took out based on the discussion last meeting. Other than that, the biggest key points for this agreement is they're going to escrow a certain amount of money with the city or with a title company, meaning, so when a certain deadline or a certain event happens, they put $50,000 into an escrow agent. If they don't fulfill their obligations, we get to keep the money. And there's 3 of those events. One is the title commitment that we provide, which shows that a title company will do a quick search and confirm that it can be insured by a title report or a title policy. And then the next one is after the approval period, which is they'll do the due diligence on their end to work with the city to make sure they can build what they want to. And when that expires, they have to put another $50,000 in. And then the last one is the second one is a soil. They're going to do an inspection of the property, make sure it complies with their technical requirements for soil compaction, non-contamination, things like that. When that period expires, they give us 50, so there'd be 100 in the escrow. And then the last one's the approval. So in theory, there could be up to 150,000 in the bank waiting for. It would go towards closing unless they backed out of the deal after those deadlines, in which case we'd just get it for our trouble for holding the property off the market. The other thing that this agreement does for the city is it makes it clear that even though the city is the ultimate approving entity for this project, that we're not guaranteeing that we're going to approve anything they throw in front of us. So they're still going to have to comply with our ordinance or help the city rework the ordinance to meet something that's mutually beneficial for both of us. So if that helps, I just tried to make it really clear to them that we're not just going to rubber stamp anything they throw in front of us. It's got to be something that complies with our ordinance or is in line with what the council envisions for this area. Because as you know, you ultimately have the say in what the zoning ordinances say. And so if you wanted to allow them, and no one suggested this, but if you wanted to allow them to do a 6 or 7 story hotel, then that's up to the council. You just have to change the zoning. Like I said, no one suggested that. It's going to be up to what the council wants to do, and if the developer, wants to pitch those type of ideas to you. and I don't think they will. That this group individual is a straight commercial. That's all they do is commercial development, so not hospitality or anything like that. So, any other questions or things I could answer? Yeah.
So my question I had last week is the city's going to pay to fill it still, right?
So the redevelopment agency, but yes, the
It's
city.
The city.
Yeah.
So,
And the estimate that the engineer's given us is somewhere between $110,000 and $140,000 to fill it in. It kind of they've given a little cushion because you never know what the price of road base and that type of material is going to be in 18 months.
I still don't like that. Honestly, I don't. Guy's buying a property, he buys property as is. That just seems to me like we're selling property for $1 million, but we're giving them $110,000 just because. So that's my heartburn still.
And that's understandable. This, with the community development area, this filling in the pond was specifically listed in that document as one of the projects for the funds to be used for, because of the because it takes it from a zero value or zero taxable value property and turns it into a commercial piece that then they can get money back on. In theory, that $140,000. I wish I had the metrics on it, but over the 20-year life of the CDA, it should reimburse the CDA the full amount that we put into it. Just because you're taking zero taxable value to, I would estimate about $10 million or more with the building and the land when it's fully developed. So it's going to be, a significant tax burden on the property owner. So, but you're right, it's a little bit of shuffling money around.
And I could still have heartburn with it.
Yeah.
I choose to.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Since I'm still fairly new here, the new detention basin will be built by when this is sold?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the reason we've pushed the construction off or the sale off till next October. We can't sell the basin until we have a new one in place.
Yeah, I was gonna say my office is really close and that's always full of water, so I want to make sure we're putting it somewhere.
Yeah. And so just for an update on that, we'll know in November if we're getting the federal grant funds for the project. If we aren't awarded the funds, then we would need to build it out of stormwater funds or some other funding mechanism. But it would be, the sale of the property would cover the expense of the new pond. So
there's a little detention pond behind the fire station.
Yeah.
You can throw a little.
Real little.
And then the new pond is over on the Double Out Ranch or the Shooting Star Ranch, depending on what year, when you moved into the town. So.
Other questions or discussion?
Have an agreement number?
A8-2018.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve the agreement A8-2018, an agreement with J.D. Mercer for the sale of 6.6 acres of North Ogden property located at approximately 190 East to 2550 North, as discussed.
We have a motion by Councilman Swanson to approve A8-2018, which is the agreement with J.D. Mercer for the sale of 6.6 acres in North Ogden, about 190 East, 2550 North.
I'll second.
I have a second by Ryan Barker. Begin the voting. Councilwoman Stoker?
Yes.
Councilman Swanson?
Yes.
Councilman Barker?
Yes.
Councilman Severie?
Yes.
Councilman Turner?
No.
Motion passes. Okay, next item on our agenda is the meeting is again open for public comment.
Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to go back to your nuisance stuff that you're addressing. And I think the three things that you've chose to address are really great. But I really think with the amount of growth that's going on in this city, we need to address the construction item as well. Having dealt with construction behind us, which we knew was going to happen, they actually go till 10, sometimes 11 o'clock at night. And the city ordinance says they can go till 10 p.m., which I think really needs to be changed more like to 9 p.m., especially during this time of the year. School is still in. It's a lot of noise. And I think we need to designate that they don't start till 7 a.m. I know on the amphitheater this morning they started at 6 a.m. So it would be nice if we really clarified that, and that we definitely enforce that they don't work on Sundays, because we have had some of that too also. So that was one thing that I asked. Also, on the dipping of the sheep, when you do make changes like that, I understand we don't dip sheep anymore, but there are kids in the city that raise sheep for 4-H. And so we want to make sure that we don't infringe upon them being able to do the things that they need to do with their sheep and stuff like that. So just put that in a drawer somewhere and stuff like that. And then I have some concerns over the sale of the land. I actually agree with Carl Turner. I really don't think it's the city's responsible to pay for that. While I understand why you think it's important, this gentleman's going to make a lot of money, or this company, or whoever is going to make a lot of money on this. And I feel like we should have really made them responsible for filling that in. And maybe that's something that can still even be addressed. I do have a question as to where the RDA money comes from. So if anybody at some point, I don't care if you just send me a text or an email, tells me where the RDA money comes from that is supposedly paying for the filling in of this, that would be awesome. Because if it's just tax money from somewhere else that the citizens are paying, then we really are paying for that. And I think it's a real disadvantage to the citizens that we're taking our money to give to a developer who's going to develop that piece of land, and who knows, maybe they will put a hotel on there. And we never know what's coming, and stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to voice my concern about the fact that the city is actually spending money to help a developer make money. It's kind of my pet peeve, as you know. I don't believe that's our responsibility, is to make the developers rich. I think our responsibility is to protect the citizens' money. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Jessie Aguirre, 870 East, 3300 North. Okay, so the city of North Ogden is known for being very safe and tranquil, thanks to our police department and its officers. But there's one thing that is affecting all of us, and there's no regulations and no consequences towards it. I'm talking about water. 70% of the earth is made up of water, and only 2.5% of that water is fresh drinking water. And even though there is 2.5%, only 1% is easily accessible. And already we live in a desert climate, and we are in a drought year yet again. And this year we are 50% below normal snowpack, which means Pineview will be at low levels, which affects us and everyone downstream from us. This also makes us more in danger for forest fires. I propose that North Ogden residents take more responsibility for their broken sprinklers heads that pour water into the streets and lawns. And we should do lawn watering from the hours of dusk till dawn. We could fix this by using fix-it tickets, which for broken sprinklers and daytime lawn watering. This can be done by our police officers, not as something they are patrolling for, but rather when they see it, they can have it be done. They can issue a warning ticket and put it in their mailbox. And if it's not fixed by 1 week, they could get a fine. We can no longer be in denial that we are in a drought area, because water is a necessity, not a luxury, and we should act responsibly and set a higher standard for the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your participation. There's no other public comments. We'll close our public comment section. Comments from our council, Councilman Turner.
Just a quick note, the Youth City Council is out tonight cleaning Washington Boulevard with iguanas. And both those groups do so much for our city that I sometimes think they get overlooked. So that's all I have right now.
Thank you for making us aware. Councilman Severin?
Nothing tonight.
Councilman Barker?
Nope, nothing.
Councilman Swanson?
Not tonight.
Councilwoman Stoker?
No.
I have no further discussion. John Call?
Council, we've had several very short meetings recently, and the idea was floated around the office, maybe we need to go back to the 2 meetings a month. I just wanted to throw that out there for council thoughts. We used to just meet on the 2nd and 4th. That's everything I've got.
Thank you. Annette Spindler, our recorder.
Mayor and council, we have 5 Tuesdays this month, so we don't meet on the 5th Tuesday, but the 4th Tuesday, we will not have a meeting if that's all right with you. Me and my deputy will be out of town at an International Municipal Clerks Conference.
Okay.
You don't see us being
Our
sad.
last meeting this month. Yeah, I'm smiling. Our last meeting this month, then that would be next week.
So no meetings, 27th, 29th.
Just something to think about.
Okay. Chief, do you have any other further discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I'd move that we adjourn the city council meeting and reconvene in the RDA meeting.
Okay. It's been moved that we adjourn the city council meeting and proceed with the RDA agenda. We'll start off with, so the RDA agenda is now in session. And a discussion and action to consider an agreement with J.D. Mercy Property Improvements on North Ogden City property located at 190 East, 2550 North. Our presenter will be John Call.
So we do just need a vote from the council to adjourn the meeting.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
a voice vote for.
We have a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll proceed. Thank you.
So council, let me tell you a little bit about, so this is the agreement that the RDA, which is the redevelopment agency,